My wife filed for divorce on my birthday in front of her family and disgraced me, but her life disgraced her. I turned 35 this past Sunday. Not a milestone, but I had hoped it might mark a turning point. My wife at the time, Meredith, had told me earlier in the week she was planning something special. I hadn't seen her that enthusiastic about anything related to me in a long time. She was always on her phone, smiling at something I couldn't see, whispering with her sister or texting when she thought I wasn't looking. For a moment, I thought maybe she was planning a surprise party. Something to remind me that maybe the cold, quiet space between us was temporary. That we could still find each other again. We'd been married for almost 7 years. We met in college. She was this confident, poised business major from an affluent family. I was a mechanical engineering student on a scholarship, juggling 2 part-time jobs and tutoring to afford basic meals. You can probably picture it. The classic opposites attract story, only, in our case, her family never stopped seeing me as an experiment. Her father Alaric, yes, that's his actual name, used to make these sly remarks during family dinners about ambition and earning your way up. Her mother, Bernice, once asked me if I was still tinkering with tools even after I was managing a full R&D team at a solid firm. They were never cruel outright. Just quietly condescending. Meredith never really stood up to them. But we made it work, or at least I thought we did. Our apartment wasn't luxurious, but it was ours. I worked long hours and saved where I could, thinking we were building towards something better. I didn't realize until much later that Meredith had long since decided it wasn't enough. In the months leading up to my birthday, she'd been more distant. More smiles sent toward her phone than toward me. Late nights at client dinners, coming home wearing fragrances that didn't belong to her. I noticed, but I said nothing. I convinced myself that maybe she was just tired. Or under pressure. Maybe I was just scared to know the truth. Anyway, back to my birthday. I'd worked that day. Not because I had to, my supervisor told me to take it off, but because staying busy seemed easier than sitting with my own thoughts. I came home that evening expecting maybe a home-cooked meal or even just a quiet night in. The apartment was dark. Then I got a message, "Come to my parents' house. Your surprise is here." I paused. Her parents' place was the last spot I'd ever want to celebrate anything, but I figured maybe she was trying to extend an olive branch. Maybe this was her way of finally making me feel like part of her family. I drove over to the estate, because let's call it what it is, their place is the kind of house with a front gate and 3 different kinds of wine glasses. Meredith met me at the door. Her smile was strange. Not joyful. Not nervous. Just flat. Calculated. Inside, her parents were there. Her sister, Geneva. 2 cousins. A few acquaintances I vaguely recognized from previous awkward family events. Everyone was holding champagne flutes. I knew, right then, something was off. "Calvin," she said, "we have a very special surprise for your birthday." Alaric chuckled. Not a warm laugh. More like a stifled snort. Then Meredith reached behind her back and handed me a manila envelope. "Surprise," she said. "I'm leaving you for someone who understands what it means to grow. Someone who doesn't hold me back." For a few seconds, I thought I hadn't heard her right. Then I looked down at the envelope. Divorce papers. Already filled out. All they needed was my signature. The room was still eerily quiet, except for the soft pop of Bernice opening a bottle of champagne. Glasses were passed around. It was clear this had been planned. Prepared. Coordinated. A celebration. Of the end of my marriage. I stood there, staring at these people who, hours earlier, had probably been laughing about this moment. Laughing at me. Maybe they expected me to protest. To break down. To fall to my knees in humiliation. Instead, I calmly asked Meredith for a pen. She blinked. Caught off guard. Her father handed me some expensive silver pen that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. I walked over to their pristine kitchen island, spread out the papers, and began signing. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why, or how could you? The only sound was the pen scratching across the pages. And one awkward cough. When I finished, I closed the folder, handed it back to Meredith, and said, "Thank you. This is the best gift you've ever given me." Then I left. No slamming doors. No raised voice. No theatrics. Just me, walking out of a room full of people who had mistaken cruelty for power. I ended up at a dive bar on the edge of town. The kind of place where no one asks questions. I ordered a whiskey. Then another. Sat in silence. Then the text started. From Meredith, why didn't you say anything? Are you really just going to walk away? You're proving why this had to happen. I didn't reply. Not right away. Something in me was shifting. A kind of quiet clarity. Not rage. Not sadness. Just distance. Like I was finally seeing everything clearly. 3 drinks in, I pulled out my phone and did 3 things. I called my old friend Desmond, an attorney who's known for playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. I started gathering every bit of digital proof I could find. Shared cloud accounts, texts, social media posts, anything that hinted at the truth Meredith thought she'd hidden. I made a list of the people who'd only ever heard her side of the story and started planning exactly how and when they'd hear mine. I didn't go home that night. And I didn't cry. I woke up the next morning on Desmond's guest room couch with a stiff neck, a mild headache, and more missed texts than I cared to count. The messages from Meredith had shifted tone overnight. No more passive-aggressive blame. These were pleading. Emotional. Disoriented. Like she'd expected her performance the night before to shatter me, and now couldn't process the fact that I hadn't even flinched. But I wasn't interested in her confusion. I had work to do. By mid-morning, Desmond and I were seated at his dining table with mugs of coffee and my laptop open between us. I showed him everything, screenshots from our cloud account, suspicious texts that had slipped through our shared devices, even the sudden change in her spending patterns. Desmond, always calm, simply nodded and took notes. He asked me one question: do you want this to be quick, or do you want it to be right? I told him I wanted it to be fair. He smiled. Then we'll do it thoroughly. Within 24 hours, the counterfiling was in motion. I moved all my important documents, electronics, and irreplaceable belongings into a rented storage unit under a different name. I transferred my half of the joint account into a new one and left hers untouched, just like Desmond advised. Everything above board. Clean. Professional. Meanwhile, Meredith was still acting like I'd ruined her life. Her messages became erratic. 1 minute it was, "This is your fault." The next, "We were supposed to be forever." And then the line that stuck with me, "You're just walking away like it meant nothing to you." I didn't respond. Not because I felt nothing, but because what I felt wasn't something that needed to be shared with her anymore. I found a month-to-month rental in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. Small, but open. A second-floor unit with a little balcony that overlooked an empty field. Nothing remarkable, just peaceful. I bought second-hand furniture from a local shop and set up my space with care. That first night, I sat on the balcony with a beer, listened to the cicadas, and realized I could breathe again. Actually breathe. That's when I started writing again. I hadn't written anything for pleasure in years. Meredith used to mock my notebooks full of unfinished ideas, so I stopped. But now, sitting under a wide sky, the words came back. Not angry ones, just real ones. About a week later, Desmond called with an update. "She was not expecting you to fight back," he said. "She assumed you'd roll over, sign whatever she gave you, and maybe ask for a toaster on your way out." Turns out Meredith had already told her family and friends a highly edited version of the story, how I was emotionally distant, uninspiring, stuck in place. A man she couldn't grow with. But what she hadn't accounted for was the digital trail she left behind. There were hotel receipts. GPS records. Texts saved on the cloud. Pictures in folders she thought were private. Conversations with coworkers and friends that didn't paint her in the flattering light she'd hoped. When Desmond presented the evidence to her attorney, the tone of their responses changed immediately. In the meantime, I started reclaiming parts of myself I'd forgotten. I signed up for a gym membership not to get a revenge body, but because I needed a place to channel everything I couldn't put into words. The first week was miserable. I couldn't bench more than a few reps without my arms trembling. But there was something comforting in the structure of it. I stopped checking her social media. Instead, I started building. I'd always loved woodworking, used to spend weekends refinishing old furniture I'd find at estate sales. Meredith hated it. Said the smell gave her headaches and the dust was low class. I let the hobby go for years, shoved it into a back corner of who I was. But now? I rented a small corner of a shared workshop space, bought some reclaimed wood, and started tinkering again. The first piece I made, a simple walnut end table, wasn't perfect. But I posted a photo online anyway. Someone messaged me within an hour asking if it was for sale. It wasn't much. $65. But I felt like I'd just won a Lifetime Achievement Award. Then came a moment I didn't expect. I was clearing out the last of my things from the apartment, an old coat and a toolbox Meredith had boxed up. When I arrived, she was there, waiting in the living room like she'd staged it. She looked different. Less polished. Like she hadn't slept. We stood in silence for a few moments. Then she said, "I've been thinking a lot." I nodded but didn't respond. "I think, maybe I made a mistake." Another pause. "Ronan isn't who I thought he was." There it was. The name she hadn't said yet. I knew about Ronan. Desmond had already uncovered plenty. Meredith's co-worker, charming, well-dressed, the one who always laughed too loud at her jokes during those company dinners. The man she left me for without ever saying it out loud. Now, apparently, Ronan had decided he wasn't as invested in their future as she was. "I thought you'd fight for me," she said, quietly. I almost laughed, but not out of spite. Just at the surrealism of it all. She planned a public divorce announcement on my birthday. Called me a disappointment in front of her entire family. Had the gall to celebrate my exit with champagne. And now, she wanted me to chase her? I looked her in the eye and said, "I already did fight for us. 4 years. Alone." Then I walked past her, grabbed my things, and left without another word. That night, I went back to the workshop and stayed past midnight, sanding a reclaimed oak coffee table. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was just done. By the time summer settled in fully, I'd stopped marking time by how long it had been since the birthday. My days had a new rhythm. Wake up early, take a walk, hit the gym, eat something that didn't come out of a microwave. Then I'd head to the workshop and lose myself in wood grain and the sound of orbital sanders. I started taking custom requests online. People would send me ideas, old photos of furniture they wanted restored or reimagined, and I'd spend hours sketching out designs. I wasn't making much, certainly not enough to quit my job, but I was making something. Something I could hold in my hands. And that mattered more than I expected. I also reconnected with a few friends from college. Ones Meredith had slowly peeled away from me over the years with offhand comments like, "He's kind of immature, don't you think?" or "I just don't see how she adds value to your life." One of those friends was Carla, someone I hadn't spoken to in 4 years. We grabbed coffee on a whim after she commented on one of my furniture posts. She brought her dog, told me about her latest failed relationship, and laughed in the same way she always had, loud, unfiltered, unashamed. We didn't dive into anything romantic. But we did start texting more often. Then came walks in the park, late-night chats about the weirdness of adulthood, and one particularly long conversation on her back porch about how people don't really change until they're forced to rebuild. I didn't expect Carla. But I didn't resist her either. There was no pressure. No performance. Just quiet mutual understanding. Meanwhile, the legal process was finally winding down. Desmond, ever methodical, had negotiated terms that worked in my favor. Because we didn't have children and most of the significant assets were in my name, it was a clean divide. Meredith's request for alimony was flat out denied. Especially after Desmond presented what he called supporting context, a collection of financial documents and calendar entries that showed just how long she and Ronan had been involved. Funny thing about digital calendars, people forget what they sync to the cloud. The moment that sealed the deal came during a preliminary hearing when her attorney mentioned emotional hardship as grounds for a favorable financial ruling. Desmond calmly replied, "Your client booked 2 romantic getaways with another man before the divorce was filed. I'm not sure the word hardship is doing the work you think it is." They didn't bring up hardship again. A few days after that hearing, I got a call from Meredith's sister, Geneva. She never liked me much, but she wasn't cruel either. Always polite. Always distant. But now she sounded hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she should even be calling. "I thought you should know," she said, "Ronan's gone." I didn't respond. He quit his job without notice. Left the city. No one knows where he went. Apparently, after Meredith's father, Alaric, found out about the affair, he tried to bring Ronan into the family business. Maybe to sweep things under the rug, or maybe to salvage some kind of leverage. Ronan took the job offer, but not the loyalty. He started funneling internal documents to outside developers, sabotaging one of their biggest commercial projects. Then he disappeared. Geneva told me quietly, "It's bad. Really bad." Alaric's company was under investigation. Some of their assets had been frozen. Clients were backing out. Meredith, who had once held a title in the marketing department of her father's firm, was let go when investigators began pulling internal emails. She tried applying elsewhere, but without her father's backing, no one bit. Word spreads fast in elite circles. Especially when there's legal heat. I think she's staying with a friend right now, Geneva said. I asked, why are you telling me this? There was a pause. Then she said, because I think she still believes you'll save her. A week later, it was my anniversary. Or, what would have been. I didn't plan to mark the day, but it lingered. Not with sadness. Just, wait. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of iced tea and watched the sky. Carla had just texted me a photo of a ridiculous-looking dessert she made with her niece, and I was mid-reply when I noticed my phone lighting up with an unfamiliar number. I let it ring out. Then came the text, Cal, please. I need to talk to you. Just 5 minutes. I stared at it. Typed a response. Deleted it. Another text came in, I've been sleeping in my car for 2 nights. I have nowhere else to go. I got up, walked to the window, and looked down. There it was, her silver car parked along the curb. Lights off. No movement. I stood there for a long time. Then I turned off the lights, sat back down, and finished texting Carla. The next morning, I saw her again. This time, she was slumped in the driver's seat, face barely visible behind dark sunglasses. Her hair was unwashed. She hadn't changed clothes. I walked downstairs with a bag of groceries and tapped on the window. She jolted awake, confused, then opened the door quickly. Calvin, thank you, I didn't know where else to. I'm not letting you freeze in a car, I said. She followed me inside. Quiet. Limping a little. The first thing I noticed was how small she looked. Not physically, but in presence. The woman who once curated every moment for optics and social polish now sat on my couch with her knees tucked up like a teenager waiting to be grounded. The second thing I noticed was how quickly the silence between us filled the room. She began talking. Or rather, unraveling. She told me about how everything had fallen apart. How Ronan had used her. How her parents had thrown her under the bus to protect the company. How her friends had stopped answering calls. How no one would hire her because of what had come out in the investigation. I've lost everything, she whispered. Everything except this car. And, you. I sat across from her, listening. Not angry. Not smug. Just quiet. Then she said something that didn't surprise me, but still felt like a weight. I thought you'd fight for me. I let out a slow breath. I fought, I said. You just weren't looking. That night, I let her stay on the couch. She asked if we could talk in the morning. I told her we'd see. When I woke up, she was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a photo I'd framed on the wall, one of the first coffee tables I ever sold. There was pride in that photo. Purpose. Something I never got to show her before. Over eggs and toast, her phone rang. She answered on speaker without thinking. It was Alaric. His voice, once arrogant and sharp, was now unsteady. We need help, he said. The board is about to remove me. We lost 2 investors this week. Then he said something that nearly made me drop my fork. Does Calvin know anyone who can step in? He was asking for a favor. From me. Alaric's voice crackled through the speaker. It was the first time I'd heard it since that night, since the birthday surprise, the champagne, the applause. He sounded like someone drowning just beneath the surface. We know you've made some good connections over the years, he said. There might be ways we can mutually benefit from this situation. Calvin, we could really use your insight. I looked across the table at Meredith. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She just sat there, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, eyes barely meeting mine. I think she already knew what I was going to say. I leaned forward, took a breath, and replied. I'm not interested in helping you, Alaric. I wish you luck, but I have nothing to offer your company. There was a long silence on the other end. Then a clipped, I see, and the call ended. Meredith stared into her mug, and I let the silence stretch. After a while, she whispered, he didn't even ask if I was okay. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Later that morning, she asked if she could stay a few more nights, just until she found somewhere else. I told her she could stay 1 more night. That was all. Not because I wanted to punish her. But because boundaries were something I'd learned to value. And I wasn't going to abandon them now, not for comfort, not for guilt, not for a familiar face that once betrayed me. You're not the person I thought you were, she said softly as she packed a small overnight bag. No, I said. Neither are you. After she left, I sat on the couch for a long time, just listening to the quiet. Then I stood, walked into the workshop corner of my apartment, and began sanding a set of pine legs for a bookshelf commission. There's something about the repetitive rhythm of working with your hands that quiets the chaos in your head. I think that's what healed me the most. That, and the decision to forgive her. Not aloud. Not for her benefit. But for me. Because carrying the weight of that anger had started to get in the way of the new life I was trying to build. And truthfully, I was just tired. Carla and I stayed in touch. There was something easy about her, something grounding. She never asked about the details unless I offered them, and when I did, she listened without judgment. One weekend, I showed her the workshop. She wandered through it like a kid in a candy store, running her fingers across half-finished tables, asking how I chose which wood to use. I told her, every piece tells you what it wants to be. You just have to pay attention. She smiled and said, that sounds like a metaphor. We never forced anything. We let it evolve naturally: walks, dinners, shared playlists, one road trip where her dog tried to eat my toolbox. It was real. And calm. And entirely mine. 3 weeks after Meredith left my apartment for the last time, I got a message from Geneva. She said Meredith had moved in with a cousin out west and was trying to start over. Her family's company had taken a massive hit, and Alaric had stepped down as CEO. There were rumors of restructuring. Of bankruptcy. Of lawsuits still pending. None of it brought me joy. None of it made me feel vindicated. If anything, I felt free. Whatever happened to them no longer had anything to do with me. One afternoon, Carla texted me a listing from a local shelter. This guy's been there for months. You need to meet him. I opened the link and saw a blurry photo of a tan pit bull mix with one ear up, one ear down, and a missing leg. His name was Jasper. That weekend, I met him. He limped over, tail wagging, and sat at my feet like we'd been friends in a past life. 2 days later, I brought him home. He drools on my couch. Steals socks. Refuses to go for walks if it's raining. But he's mine. He's real. And somehow, he makes this place feel like home in a way it never did before. Last month, I finally moved out of the apartment and into a small single-story house just outside the city. It's nothing flashy, just a 2-bedroom with a backyard and enough space to set up a full workshop in the garage. On the first night, I grilled dinner, sat on the porch with Jasper, and watched the sky turn lavender behind the trees. For the first time in years, there was no ache in my chest. No weight pressing behind my ribs. Just air. Just peace. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if Meredith ever truly believed the version of me her family painted, that I was lesser, temporary, a stepping stone. Or if, deep down, she always knew it was easier to blame me than confront the truth of her own unhappiness. Either way, I'm not angry anymore. She gave me a gift, just not the one she intended. She gave me the chance to rebuild from the ground up. Without pretense. Without performance. Without fear of not being enough. Now, I spend my days making things with my hands. Real things. Solid things. Some people pay for them. Others just want to hear how they were made. And every once in a while, when I'm sanding a tabletop or staining a set of drawers, I think about that moment at the marble counter, the pen in my hand, the laughter behind me, the paper beneath my palm, and I smile. Because that was the moment everything changed. That was the moment I got my life back. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.